Hi everyone, welcome to week 2 of Open Hardware Leaders. We are here with Jose to record a video on the main topics that we're going to go through this week, which are, as you can see there, personas and pathways. So to be brief, today's agenda is where are we in week 2 and where are we going? Our goal is to identify, to profile different kinds of people that will interact with our project in different ways, understand and model our community members through personas, the tool of personas that we will see after these slides, and creating proper channels for these users and contributors to interact with us based on pathways too. So I'm gonna give now the word to Jose.
Thank you, Yuli. Hi, everyone. So a quick reminder, this is the process that we're following. We are generating ideas with these tools of the canvas to then start prioritizing to finally end up implementing and testing your ideas about your product, about how your community should work, etc. So we're going to see also as a reminder that everything that we're doing in these weeks and the main goal of this process is that you make sure that you are focusing on the right aspect of your product, of your project at the moment. You are making sure that you are being accurate about the selection of the functionality of your project or your product, the requirements and design considerations. And just to emphasize this, one of the most difficult aspects is to translate contextual insights like this kind of thing we're doing into technical requirements, specifications, and actual implementations. That's why we insist a lot on this. So this second week is also about capturing your value proposition, and in particular the circle part of the value proposition canvas. Yeah, we will try to help you in to do so with personas and pathways. So still, week 1 and week 2 are focused on refining and detailing your value proposition. So if you are not yet there with your value proposition, that's fine. It's intentional because this week is also complementing that activity. So just to clarify again, personas and pathways are tools to make a more solid value proposition and open canvas model. That's why we're doing it. So what is a persona anyway? You have kind of seen already a bit what it is, because if you already experienced the value proposition canvas, you saw the circle where there is the customer or user side of it. And a persona is basically a model or a description of a person as concrete as possible. So as a human being with frustrations, ideas, needs, etc. Based on your real world observations and understandings of your actual context of potential users and contributors. So it is a personified user profile. I would like to put also as an example that, for instance, in my experience, many personas that I use in the projects are people that actually exist, and I say, this is the kind of person that is interesting to the project because he has these qualities or whatever. So you might find examples of actual people in your project or other projects that might be personas in your context. So yeah, that's a tip to start modeling your personas, and use it to specify more your user and contributor profiles. The point and the challenge of all these activities is that you actually make things so specific that they are accurate in your context, right? And that's really challenging. So it's gonna help you in these two aspects of the two canvases that we're giving you. Let's also see an example, because we believe that examples are really useful. And this is actually a way in which you can do your persona. We're gonna look at the persona of a user in the context of Arduino. And this persona has some, is implementing some real things that happen in the Arduino project. So you can check out later about the Arduino project and you'll find out. But we're assuming Andrea, which is a guy who is 22-year-old, an interaction design student that doesn't have an engineering background, but he likes doing stuff and he wants to get into technical stuff. He's more of an artist guy, but he likes also technical stuff. He doesn't know where to start, what is the right approach, what is the right tools, etc. If you're going to start defining the activities or the tasks that Andrea is going to do in his university, is that normally he's doing a study, so he has to put a lot of time in studying and learning. But he also wants to build prototypes and test his designs or ideas in a very simple way. One of the pains that he finds is that the technology to implement things is very advanced, very technical, very detailed, also very costly. And it's for people that normally have an engineering background. So programming microcontrollers for him is a no-go. He cannot do it with the current solutions. What would he like to see? What are the gains or the positive aspects that he would like to see in the world of programming microcontrollers? He would like to see tutorials that teach people by the hand with no technical background how to control, I don't know, servo motor or a sensor or other kinds of things. He wants to be able to build circuits in a very simple and straightforward way. And to that, it would be awesome to have starter kits or let's say simple tools that are also cheap and allow you to easily jump into the electronic world. So he also would like to see other people's projects, so seeing them online might be something interesting. And he wants to enjoy and grow in this pursuit of building stuff with electronics. So that's an example of a persona in the context of Arduino. If you actually see the project of Arduino, those were the main motivations why Arduino started as a project. So think how this makes sense in the context of your project. What is the specific personas that are relevant to your domain? So we're going to see another example now of a persona for a contributor, because the interesting thing about open source projects is that you are designing for different kind of people, and one of the most important segments that you're working for is the contributors, especially if you want other people to improve your project. In this case, we have Laura. This is a persona for a contributor. Laura is 25-year-old master student in computer science and engineering. So she's very different from Andrea. She has a very technical background and she wants to work really on high-tech, challenging stuff. She has been working with Arduinos and let's say microcontrollers since she was a girl, a little kid, and now she wants to go further and actually do substantial contributions to the project with new board design that is smaller, can be used in a wearable, in clothes, for instance. And she also wants to easily program Arduino with Python because she is a bit bored of programming in the Arduino language. She likes better doing everything in Python. So what are the kind of jobs that she would do as a contributor? Well, she wants to make an open source contribution that can also be a master graduation. Remember that because it's a persona, we are considering a student, so she would like to graduate with a nice contribution to open source. And she would like to release and test the designs online and get feedback from a community of developers. So that's a very different job from what Andrea wanted to do. What pains that she has at the moment? It's not clear how she can contribute, who she can contact, or which are the main developers of the project. And she also has limited knowledge on designing for manufacturing and industrial production. So that's another issue, another pain that she has. We could also add the pain of the time that she has to deliver her thesis. What positive things she is looking for in the context of open source hardware, and in particular the Arduino project? She would like to find a list of issues and challenges where she can actually contribute and find assignments that fit to her master thesis. And she also wants to grow as an engineer during this process of doing a successful open source contribution to the Arduino project. So these are two examples of personas. You can have several of them. You can have, yeah, you can make different types as well in your team to find out or model your context. So why do we have to do all this? It sounds like a lot of work, but actually it's, these are very powerful design tools because it helps you empathize with your audience. And if you look at the canvas, the red circles are actually aspects that personas will help you to specify more. When you understand better your users and contributors, you have a better understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. They are a source of validation of your ideas. This will help you to understand better the blue boxes, the solutions that you are doing. And if you see, there is the user profiles in, concretely will help you to implement better channels or pathways, as we will see later. And the same for contributor profile. So the personas that we are going to do in this week will help you to have a second version of your canvas improved, hopefully. So we will, yeah, that's why we're doing it. So essentially, personas and pathways are tools to design and implement a more solid value proposition, but also channels for your users and contributors. And yeah, I guess now we're gonna start talking about pathways, and Julie is gonna, yeah, explain you all she knows about this kind of stuff.
Oh, thank you, Jose. So after you have started thinking about your personas, and something that I would like to highlight from what Jose explained, that in open source we have personas for users, but we have also personas for contributors. Then your pathways will be also different. And you have to design them, you have to start conceptualizing how these pathways are going to look like. If we think as, when we say pathways, it may sound a bit like too vague, but it's in fact the way that we are gonna build for the user or contributor to interact with our project. So this slide, you see there documentation as pathways for users, is for the user's persona that maybe there are one or more. Okay, you can have, as Jose mentioned, one or more personas for users. The most important channel you will have, or way of interacting you will have with your user, will be a very, very good documentation. So if you have very, very, very good documentation, you are saving yourself a lot of work afterwards. We're going to share the link to these slides, so you will be, and these links are also in the curriculum. This is not, we are not focusing now on building the documentation, but you can start outlining, according to your personas, which are the documentation building blocks you will need. So documentation is not just plain text. Documentation, in the case of hardware, mostly, you can record videos on how to use, on tutorials, on which adaptations you can make using your project. This kind of graph with 4 squares tries to sum up that those 4 options for documentation: learning-oriented, problem-oriented, information-oriented, understanding-oriented. So right now, what we intend to do in this week is that you focus on building your personas for users and thinking of which are the pathways, thinking in particular, which are the needs of documentation for your users' personas to interact with your project. Some common channels in open source projects that you probably know and probably heard of are READMEs, of course. READMEs are the first thing that, well, the first thing besides your website that someone will interact with, the way the person will interact with your project, sorry. Repositories, when you are talking about contributors mostly. As I mentioned, landing pages, websites, especially for users, right? Because if you consider users and contributors, most users will probably see your website first. Community chats, community forums, repository issues, contributing guidelines. So these are all resources you have available as an open source project to interact with either your user personas, your contributor personas. And again, what we want during this week is that you start conceptualizing how you're going to use them. So moving from user personas to contributors personas, one of the probably most volume of contributions we'll attract will be development contributions, right? So coding and also design, other kind of very technical contributions. So what do we have to do to conceptualize a pathway for a technical contribution? We can think of someone who wants to replicate and use your product, but how are they going to do it? Are they going, for example, we have listed there in the slide some examples. Are they going to open a new issue, report a bug, contribute to a new fundamental feature in your project, for example, become a project maintainer? So how are you going to not to attract, but once the person is willing to contribute to your project, which are the steps that this person must take in order to do it effectively, as easy as possible, trying to make it, because it's usually volunteer contribution, trying to make it very easy for the person and very easy for you to accept this contribution. So we were talking about technical contributions, but there are also different interactions. If you have experience with project management, or if you have experience with different kinds of projects that are more advanced, a tool that is usually used is identifying stakeholders, identifying agents that are relevant to your project, which is very similar to identifying personas. Personas is just making that very concrete and giving it a name and giving it a very concrete description that will help you a lot to transform that into a requirement. So when you think of non-technical contributions, sorry, we can think of, for example, journalists that will contribute to your project by amplifying the outreach, by getting to new audiences. University staff that will give you contributions of, for example, institutional resources or legitimacy to your project. Commercial partners that will deliver your project somewhere else. You can think of many different actors that are relevant to your project, and it's interesting to start thinking how to reach out to them. So let's say that I have a very concrete example of this, because in my own project, we had to identify which were the stakeholders that were relevant for us. We are designing mobile air quality monitors for bike sharing services of the city. And of course, the bike sharing service is a key stakeholder, right? So how are we going to reach out to this service? Are we going to plan a meeting? What do we need from these people? Are they going to be partners of us? Are they going to have a share of our company or our project? Are they going to instead receive training instead of money? Like this kind of things, it's good to be thinking about them in advance so you don't get surprised by them. As you see in the slide, also for investors, and this is maybe more for more advanced projects or projects that already have some years going and have attracted some investors. It's also a nice tool to start thinking strategically about your project. So as a summary of today, what I think is relevant is to try to use personas to model and represent relevant actors for your project in two ways: users, contributors, and contributors that will be technical, like coding, design, different kinds of technical aspects, and contributors is not the specific word for that, but agents or stakeholders that are key for your project in other aspects, like business partners, distributor channels, things like that. Once you have this identified, then you can very concretely try to understand or conceptualize how you're going to, what do you need to do in order to reach out to them, and in order for them to interact with you in an effective way. And that is the pathway. And we suggest that we think that we will, after this exercise, you will have some more new information to update your Canvas, and we suggest you to do it and share it. You can share it with us. So as Jose was saying, these 2 weeks are all about really going deeply into your project and really trying to understand your value proposition from different points of view. So it's a very solid thing once you go out of the nest and you go outside and you start facing the external world. So how this all translates into the assignments for this week that you can check in the curriculum online on the website. So we ask you to create, of course, a persona and a pathway for your project. You will probably realize that you need more than one, at least one for a user and one for a contributor. And if you really go deep into it, you can see that, as we were saying, contributors can be of different nature, so probably different persona for that. That's the first task. Second task is to update your project repository, because we saw that everyone created the repositories. Thank you for that. Update them with a good README file. And the README file has to take into account the considerations of the personas, right? So know who is your audience and talk to the audience in this way. Probably you'll have a user section and a contribution section, okay? And if all of this, as I was mentioning, makes you reflect and makes you update your canvas, you can perfectly do it and share it with us in Riot, start thinking how to test these things. Do you have to do a survey, maybe, for example, for testing this validation, for validation of this idea, sorry. So that's all from me. I don't know, Jose, if you want to add anything. Okay. Okay, so thank you so much for for watching this video, and let us know as usual through email or Riot channels if you have any doubt or you want to make any suggestion or you have any ideas to contribute to the program. And see you next week.
Bye. See you next week.